Welcome to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of the human element in testing. And I want to welcome to the show for her very first appearance, Heena Patel, who is a business continuity management resilience professional who's been focusing on the financial industry. Heena, welcome to the show.
Hey Alex, how you doing? Thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for reaching out to be a guest. Now, as
But
I said, we're going to be talking, at least in this episode, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of the human element in testing. So why don't we just jump straight into it and say, what are the pros?
yeah, so I think one of the there's many pros, but I'll sort of highlight it for you. I think it involves realistic decision making, the human element of the scenario testing of the pros. I would say leaders are able to sort of prioritize, negotiate where possible, or from what I've seen from my experience as well. You can balance risk in the moment from a human perspective, I would say. Definitely reveals gaps that documents can't test as well. So, especially when you're in the middle of a particular incident scenario, etc., it definitely reveals those gaps and vulnerabilities. Again, going by my experience from what I've seen, the incident can be very dynamic driven as well. It holds accountability, I would say, as well in that respect. It challenges known assumptions, I would say, as well. So, whether you've applied controls particularly to a particular risk or a particular gap, etc. It challenges those sort of controls and risks that you put in place, whether they can be applied or not. Especially in a scenario when you're testing it, you put it to pen to paper and you say, right, yeah, we can do this. But when you actually scenario testing from a human element, you think, oh, actually, no, that's not going to work. So that kind of reveals those gaps and vulnerabilities, and then that drives forward your sort of actions and a further sort of controls and risk measures that you can put in place, I think, as well.
And I guess
And
that can uncover some assumptions too. Like that
yeah,
could be a pro as well, right?
yeah, and you're validating that, continuously validating it, and testing. By testing, you're continuously validating your methods and controls that you have in place from the human element. Again, speaking back on the training effectiveness, so it validates that training effectiveness, allowing the human to sort of ask those questions directly, shows elements of how and what you would do in the event of a particular scenario. Or again, incidents are very dynamic as well. It can be a bit subjective on how you approach it as well. But basic principles of roles and responsibilities should apply in a scenario as well. Knowing who to contact, like your critical priorities, processes, you should know that. So I definitely think it's a good way of, in terms of a human element of testing. It definitely validation is key to your training, I think, as well, to your risk and controls. So those are just a few things I think I'm putting forward.
Well, I see. I the kind of person who also finds when the cons, which we'll go to in just a minute, um, some of those are actually pros to me because you're going to, like I said, uncover assumptions that you didn't even know were there. That's a pro, even though it might be a con that some people see it like, oh my God, another assumption we didn't know. Good. Let's find that under controlled circumstances, right?
Exactly. And it's good because although it might not be seen sort of good in the moment, I would say as well, but it is a good thing because by highlighting any flaws, vulnerabilities, gaps, risks, whichever way we want to call them, right, that in itself strengthens your resilience. I think whether you strengthen your business impact analysis or your BCP, you're looking at operational resilience. You're looking at your impact tolerances, you're looking at important business services. So that in itself validates everything, I think, as well. So, knowing those assumptions and highlighting them definitely sort of puts you in a good place for resilience overall, I think. So, yeah.
I think the next one's going to be a bridge between the pro and the con here, is you can help identify whether you've got the right people. Because a lot of times these crisis management teams or
Yeah.
response teams, whatever, they're identified quite often through hierarchical means. This position has to be the director of XYZ. This has to be the senior manager of XYZ, whatever it is. But if you're testing and you've got the human element, depending on how you're testing, you could be able to identify people saying, you know what, that Alex guy's not the right guy to run this. We need him somewhere else. He's stronger somewhere else, but he sucks at this, right? So you can really use that as a pro to help identify,
Yeah.
the right people that you need.
Exactly, and even though Alex, you might have the right people, and for example, in a crisis management team, exercise, or even in real terms, even if you had the member of the CMT there, that doesn't necessarily mean they're the right person to make those key decisions, etc. You may need to pull in someone from a tactical level. If you go by the gold, silver, bronze structure, you have the gold team, which is your strategic CMT, level. You may need to pull someone in from the operational level, possibly to feed back in and loop back in and give those, allowing the gold level structure, so CMT members to make that key level decisions that they need to make in the event of a scenario or an actual real life crisis, to be honest, as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can't help but think I wrote about it in one of my books, forgot which one, but I called it the Mighty Mouse principle, where sometimes you've got someone in a position and Mighty Mouse comes in to save the day, just like the old cartoon, he used to
Yeah.
sing, "Here I come to save the day." They
Yeah.
come in to save the day and they cause more problems than they're actually solving because of some of the cons that we'll probably touch on. But
Yeah.
you find out they're not the right person for that role.
That's just it. You're absolutely right, and we'll touch upon the cons. I think we're going to go into it from the human element side of things. I think it's knowing whilst the person may have a role possibly in that CMT, for example, that doesn't necessarily mean like you said, like they're the right person as well. Yes, they can make key decisions, but are they able to function on that operational level as well? So it's knowing the roles and responsibilities. I think that's absolutely key as well. And yeah, Mighty Mouse is a perfect example as well. So
I'm glad you get the reference because I'm really dating myself with that.
it's a good
But
one.
why don't we jump to the cons then? Let's jump straight into some of the cons of the human
Yeah,
element.
sure, sure. So I think one of them I would say, again, probably speaking from experience, it's resistance. I would say resistance or to change up in terms of participation, only because some scenarios tend to be much of the same. If I've always feel that if they're not specifically focused on a department or a business unit's, BIAs, the actual impact tolerance is really going granular level here, sort of thing, and then talking about their BCPs, what they have in terms of recovery capabilities, and if it's not focused on their specific vulnerabilities, their weaknesses, it doesn't really hold any value to that stakeholder. So that's what I find in the challenges in the human element of like scenario testing is that resistance to participation. It's like, oh, okay, why are we doing this again? Why am I here again? As well. So it's really showing that value is key in why you're here, why we're doing it. It's not just a compliance check exercise, etc., that you have to do
Right.
annually, etc. So especially for critical areas and all areas, to be fair as well. So I think that's one of the most key factors that I do find. But again, it's how you balance it with your stakeholders, and it's showing that value. Value holds weight, obviously, as well. So if you can show that value. But it is definitely a bit of a, yeah, certainly a challenge, I would say as well. So in that respect, have you got
Well,
any questions?
I just wanted to add something where you were talking about, why are we doing this again? Why are we here?
Yeah.
Sometimes that comes about in the human element because of fear. They don't
Yes.
want to talk about disasters or crises or anything because
No.
a lot of times, you throw in these injects and people become fearful, or suddenly they feel as though they have to have an answer for everything instead of relying on their team to help, or they don't want to talk about some disaster where there's a casualty. Oh, if we
No.
don't talk about it, it won't happen. We'll be fine, right? That fear factor.
It is that fear factor, and that's one of the other sort of subjects I wanted to touch upon in terms of the cons. It is a fear factor. You're absolutely right, but in my own opinion, in my own view, there is no right or wrong answer to a scenario, etc. Again, like I said, it's dynamic. It can be quite subjective. You always go in and say, well, there's no right or wrong answer. It's just testing. It's not even testing yourself. Like it's not even testing the stakeholder, even if you're throwing injects in, you're testing your BCP, essentially. You're testing your BCP, the recovery capability of it, finding out if there's any flaws. So flaws meaning, and some people, like you say, that fear factor, they don't want to possibly acknowledge that I don't have enough key people or key person, key people to do that particular critical function, etc. So, and it's just highlighting that. So, oh, isn't it? I haven't thought about cross training, or I mean, people do, but I haven't thought about business transference in terms of to another region, for example.
Mhm.
So those are those questions that or injects that you throw out to in the event of a scenario tabletop, with the human element of testing, and you ask those injects, and you're right, Alex, like they some people are fearful of getting the answer wrong, but there is no right or wrong answer. It's just how you would react to a particular situation, and again, it's dynamic. So there's no right or wrong answer, in my opinion.
Well, I guess there is kind of this one wrong answer, and that's to do nothing.
Well, absolutely. To do nothing would be catastrophic. So no, you're absolutely right. So definitely do something, right? Don't do nothing at all. So you at least know your roles and responsibilities as well, who to contact. I mean that's and your critical priorities. So yeah, that would be key. So yeah, but no,
Yeah,
absolutely.
you've mentioned one of the cons as well from our previous communications is people going down rabbit holes.
Yeah.
Why does that happen, and how do we stop it from happening?
I think well, I think in terms of the other things is people go down rabbit holes because they again it goes back to looking that fear factor in my view of looking for the right answer. They want to almost play it safe when they answer. So they go down a rabbit hole looking for the right answer as well. Everyone's going to have different views, they're quite subjective, etc. So I think that's the other sort of side of things where you do go down rabbit holes and look at all the variables, but in any event or scenario it's impossible, Alex, to look at all eventualities, to look at all variables as well, but to look at plausible ones, the ones that can be managed. I think that's the most sensible approach. But going down a rabbit hole and discussing it from the human element, there's lots of voices possibly in the room, or or virtually, etc. Whichever way we look at that. But I think it's again, you go down a rabbit hole sometimes, I find, because there's no right, again, there's no, you're looking for the right answer, and sometimes you're looking to not challenge yourself, so you go down that rabbit hole trying to look for the right answer, but sometimes there isn't the right answer to it, etc. It's just a view. So
I read a long time ago, because I have lots and lots of books, that sometimes people go down rabbit holes trying to test you, the professional,
yeah,
so that if you can't find me the answer, then to what you said earlier, why are we here?
well,
You
yeah.
should be able to answer every single nuance of every single scenario. That's impossible.
It is impossible, and that's what I sort of leaned to earlier, that it is actually impossible to look at all the variables, all the eventualities, but it's really look at plausible ones where you can manage them effectively. I think that is the fundamental and underlying thing in the human element of testing and validation, is what's actually plausible and what you can actually manage. So again, you're going to be, fatigued, etc. You're not going to be able to think clearly, and humans have that emotional state um, doing a scenario exercise as well. So yeah, the rabbit hole goes back to the emotional state as well. So you
Mm.
may be looking at, challenging that. So there could be many variables and factors there when you look at those sort of things, and it depends again on the scenario that you faced with. But you'll have many sort of um, emotional kind of sort of variables coming out, or values coming out there, etc. So be it good or bad, you might have a bit of both, but the discussions around the processes, I would say, the views and opinions from participants can be very varied. I think that's what it is. But it's really honing in, and like I'll say this so many times, but you know, you probably get tired of hearing it. But it's just really looking at what your manageability is, what's plausible. I think that's what your focus is as well. But yeah.
You mentioned emotional states there. Would that be because of the human element, pros and cons? Could that be both? Because we kind of touched and danced around a little bit, but emotional states of people, I think that could be a pro and a con.
Of course, yeah, yeah. I think it'd be a pro and a con. Con, con in a sense of um, you challenge the what if scenarios, and you go down that rabbit hole looking for the right answer when there isn't one, etc. The pro in human element form of testing, in terms of looking at that, is yeah, definitely you have the emotional state where it's a different kind of state, where you're not looking at, oh gosh, what if. It's like, okay, this is plausible and this isn't plausible. So A and B, you have an advantage to it as well as a disadvantage to it, but again, it's everyone's subjective view on it as well, so there's a bit of both.
Yeah, because in testing, well, sorry, forget testing for a moment. A lot of leaders, are their emotional state is always looking at that bottom line. Are we on track when it comes to the bottom line?
Yeah,
In a
yeah,
test where you've got whatever scenario, a
yeah,
lot of the decisions you have are now based on the impact on people. And
yes,
that's two very different emotional states to be sitting in and trying
exactly.
to manage.
No, exactly, because you're looking at something that's on paper, then you're looking at something that you said that you're going to do on paper, or you've discussed it possibly at a forum. But when you're faced with the scenario and you're actually running the exercise, your thought process can be very different to what you've actually said what it will do. So you're absolutely right. But it can have its pros and cons as well. But in the emotional state at the time, then it's about quick decision making as well when you do the scenario testing, as you know, when you're validating. And sometimes humans will, you question yourself. You double question yourself. Go, actually, did I do that right? Or should I said this? Or should I said that? So you'll have that emotional state where you question yourself, or if someone else challenges you, you would have that actually, did I say that right, or could I done it differently? But yeah, and that's where it leads down to those rabbit hole discussions as well with people. So yeah,
It all ties together, doesn't it?
it does tie together. Or it could be a light bulb moment in a very
Yeah.
positive state to say, okay, actually, yeah, that works. I could do that and I could use that. So yeah.
Well, we're coming to the end of the episode. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share on the human element in testing?
I think in terms of human element testing, I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, is really look at your manageability state, what's plausible and what's manageable for the human, and look at your key people, I think, as well, and what you have. So, yeah.
Well, Hina, thank you so much for talking about this. I know we're going to talk about something else very shortly, but it was a pleasure chatting with you, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Alex. Pleasure to have you on here. Thank you.